Can I have your attention? It's time for our next speaker. And I'm Judy McCullough, Director for RCAF from Region 2. And I get the privilege of introducing our speaker. I'm going to start out with the word that we are Wyoming proud of this speaker. Very proud of her. I have known her many years. I can remember testifying in the same committee meeting in the legislature at Wyoming and was so impressed with her at the time. And I knew her dad. He used to be the chair of the House Ag Committee, and I had testified in front of him. And that explains why Harriet's got the strength and that she's steady, she's solid, because she knows that she was raised by a man that was solid and taught her the things that she needed to know. And she grew up in the ranching industry and understands it very well. And I know that she is an honor to her father. So I would like to explain that Congresswoman Harriet Hageman represents the state of Wyoming in the U.S. House of Representatives. She attended Casper College on a livestock judging scholarship and earned both her bachelor degree and law degree from the University of Wyoming. And she also showed cattle when she was in FFA and 4-H. She has been a litigator for 34 years. She opened her own law firm in August of 2000. She's nationally known for challenging federal overgrowth, and not just federal overreach, but not just that. She challenges those who challenge the Constitution. Protecting water rights and users, exposing federal land and wildlife mismanagement, protecting private property rights, and fighting back against the unconstitutional and unlawful acts of unelected bureaucrats. She is hated by those who she challenges because they know the strength that she has. And we are the most fortunate people of all that she is in Congress at this time, and the blessing that she is to the ranching community. I'd like to welcome my friend, Congresswoman Harriet Hageman.
Very sweet, especially the mention of my dad.
Oh, he was wonderful.
He was. Thank you, and what a wonderful introduction. I have known Judy for a long time. We have fought some interesting battles together over the years, and fortunately, I've also had the opportunity to work with RCAF and many of you in this room to fight some of those same battles to protect our legacy industry, to protect our livestock industry, protect our private property rights, and our ability to exercise our constitutional rights. I'm going to go over some of the things that have been happening and that I have been working on in Congress and some of the issues that we're attempting to resolve. With this favorable administration in place, and the fact is that Donald Trump has issued some incredible executive orders in the last 6 months to unleash our energy, to protect private property, to recognize that the federal government owns too much in terms of our land estate and a variety of other things. Also closing our border. I was just reading some of the statistics today about the difference between now and a year ago, and it's just mind-blowing what a different president, the difference that a new president can make. But it is also really important that we try to secure the future of our independent cattle producers. I first want to talk about the Mod case, and I understand that Heather and Charles spoke a little bit earlier today. Truly two of my heroes for the battle that they had to fight. But it is indicative that cooler heads are prevailing and that public land management is finally being aligned with what the original intent was. It also is acknowledging the employment of best practices through cooperation with grazers and these federal agencies. This administration is understanding and recognizing the importance of responsible energy development and mining, and also understands the importance of our ag industries. But it is still vital to reduce the bureaucratic hurdles that we have seen. What happened with the mods never should have happened in a free country, never should have happened in our republic. But I think it is indicative that there continue to be rogue individuals within these agencies who are more interested in furthering their own agenda than carrying out the agenda that they have been assigned pursuant to their job title and their position within these agencies. Federal control over public lands has too often been a barrier to economic growth and local decision making, and states and local communities should have greater authority to manage these lands based upon the unique needs of each individual state. On the House Judiciary Committee, we have started to reveal and pull back the unknown and lengthy list of statutory and regulatory crimes for which no American should be punished, and which escalate situations such as those in the Mod or the Grand Teton Runner case. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but there is a gentleman who is a trail runner that the Park Service has been aggressively pursuing for a criminal prosecution because he ended up on a trail that was unmarked as being closed. He wasn't aware that it was closed. But we were eventually able to get involved in this case. We were not contacted. My office was not contacted until fairly late in the proceedings. In fact, they went to trial before we were able to intervene, but eventually we were able to intervene with the White House, and we got the National Park Service to discontinue any prosecution of this gentleman. What they were attempting to do was destroy his ability to continue with his trail running career or even have a job, merely because of the fact that he was running on what was ostensibly a closed trail that other people were running on as well, but they decided that they were going to target him. I felt the same way about the mods. The more I learned about that case after getting involved, was it very much appeared to me that they were being targeted for improper purposes. And fortunately, with this administration and Secretary Rollins, they were able to withdraw and stop the persecution that was going on. Last year, when I was here, we discussed the threat of the Biden administration's natural capital accounting agenda, which included the infamous natural asset companies, or NACs. After we blocked the ability for the New York Stock Exchange to list NACs, we have continued to try to dismantle the rest of that agenda. When I first started learning about NACs, or natural asset companies, I thought this is just kind of the strangest thing. What a pyramid scheme. I mean, literally, they're selling the air and pollination and vegetation and wind on these properties and claiming that we can monetize that. In the regulation, or in the proposed rulemaking to list NACs on the New York Stock Exchange, they claim that natural assets of the lands that many of you in this room own, the natural assets on those lands would be an additional $100 trillion in value. Well, you can imagine, if you remember in 2008 when our banks started bundling bad mortgages, selling them as securities, and it basically collapsed our banking system for a period of time. It was a pyramid scheme then, and this is even worse of a pyramid scheme because there's no real asset that they're buying and selling. What they are trying to buy and sell is control over private property, control over our federal lands by someone like Bill Gates or even the Chinese Communist Party or the Venezuelan government. That's what they're attempting to do with this, but I thought that it was just associated with the natural asset companies and trying to get them listed on the stock exchange. What we found as we dug deeper is that this NAC concept, or natural asset concept, really has been embedded in layer after layer after layer after layer of the federal government over the last 4 years. So we're trying to identify ways in which both the Biden administration and Congress have tried to further this agenda of monetizing the natural assets of our public and private lands. One of the ways in which they've done that is in the last Pelosi omnibus spending bill in December of 2022, they embedded what's called the Sustains Act within that omnibus spending bill, and the Sustains Act is a way for the USDA to work with private organizations or private individuals, again, such as a Bill Gates, to direct funding towards what they would refer to as protecting these natural assets on private property. So you could actually sign up and have your natural assets. You could receive money for the natural assets of your land, but someone else would be able to dictate then what you can do on those lands. So it's another way, kind of a backdoor way for conservation easements, but really without telling the truth about the consequence of entering into these. I have partnered with Russ Vaught at the Office of Management and Budget during the Trump transition to report that we are continuing to try to find where these natural asset companies and the NAC agenda has been embedded, and trying to pull those out so that he's well aware of what this could potentially do in terms of undermining private property rights. I have already been asked several questions today about where we are on the EID. I believe Kara has already spoken or will be speaking today. Kara Rollins, your attorney, who continues to fight this battle for you related to the EID mandate. Last Congress, I led a CRA, or Congressional Review Act resolution, and worked to defund the rule through the appropriations process. Just a couple of months ago, in April, I testified before the Appropriations Committee for the Committee of Agriculture to further advocate for a voluntary rather than a mandatory program. The people who were on that committee, the chairman, as well as both the Republican and Democrats on that subcommittee, were actually were very amenable to what I was talking about. They asked a lot of really good questions. I believe the video might be available on the Appropriations Committee website for the Agriculture Committee to watch that, but they has some very good questions. I thought that it was an excellent opportunity to educate my fellow members of Congress as to what a mandatory EID actually does. This year, the USDA appropriations bill reported from committee. The bill that has been reported from committee does include $15 million for no less than 11 million tags and the related infrastructure. And we have been working with the Trump administration to find a path forward for this rule. I sometimes lose track of time just because I travel so much and there's so much this is going on when I am back in Washington, D.C., but I believe that it was just maybe about 10 days ago, I had an opportunity with my staff to meet with some of the top folks at USDA to talk about our concerns with the mandatory rule, what we believe that they could do to make this a voluntary program. They were pretty candid with us that there is a split in the USDA as to whether they believe it should be mandatory or not. There's a split in your industry as to whether it should be mandatory or not. So I don't think it's probably surprising that even within USDA, they don't quite know which direction to go, but I continue to advocate that this should not be a mandate. And I do that through showing what has happened in other countries when they have adopted a mandatory EID, such as in Ireland with their passport program and the amazing amount of paperwork that people have to fill out for each head of cattle to stay in compliance with their EID mandate. And then in I believe it was either Denmark or the Netherlands that they imposed a $100 a head tax on cattle, not because of any kind of a disease outbreak, but because of their contribution to so-called global warming. So there is obviously, I continue to have concerns about the mandatory program, not because I don't believe we need a robust traceability program in place, which we largely have, but because I don't trust government, and I don't trust what our government can do with the data, what they will do with the data, and what they will do with having the ability to block your access to the market, to manipulate you and force you to do what they want you to do. I still believe that the only way that they can give a cull order is if they know where the cattle are, if they know how many head you have. That's what we first saw in Ireland. It was the first step that they took. One of the first steps that they took is after they adopted an EID mandate in the spring of 2022, by August of 2023, they'd issued an order they had to slaughter 41,000 head of cattle. And again, it wasn't because of a disease outbreak, it was because of global warming, climate change. This was their way to reduce methane emissions. So they really can't do that unless they know how many there are, where they are, and potentially issue an order on a percentage basis of how many you would have to reduce your herd nearby. Now, they eventually backed off of that because of the outcry, but you can obviously see where some of these radical environmentalists could go with this kind of information, and that's why we continue to push the USDA. I also understand that there is some concern about the Angus Association and what has recently happened with them, but I think that what they've done actually vindicates our work against mandatory EID. The Angus Association, the largest breed association in the U.S., accepted $4.85 million from the Bezos Earth Fund to develop an EPD that documents the amount of methane emitted by cows. I know that there are a lot of Angus producers that were pretty angry about this, and I've always said it, I absolutely do not concede. I do not concede the global warming, climate change, methane, CO2 connection. And I don't for a lot of reasons. One is that they've cooked the books for years. Their modeling has always been incorrect. Instead of recognizing with the predictions that they made 20 and 30 years ago, and then looking forward to where we are now and going back and comparing the projections and the predictions that they made and recognizing that they were off by a magnitude of 2, 3, 4, 5, or in terms of what the real impact was going to be, that we were no longer going to have a polar ice cap, that the seas were going to be rising by 12 feet. Greta Thunberg said we were all going to die by 2023. I will say one thing that I think that the global warming crowd has learned is that you really should not give a drop dead date for when the earth is going to end. They don't do that as often anymore, although some of them still can't resist and still say stupid things like, yeah, by 2026, we're no longer going to have snow in North America and things, which I always love those predictions. But that's the crazy part about it, is that their predictions don't come true, but it doesn't change their course moving forward, which tells you that it's about control and it's about money. One of the things that I worked on with the reconciliation package that we've been working on in Washington, D.C., is trying to find all of the ways in which the Biden administration tried to embed the so-called climate change agenda within a variety of bills that were passed during his first 2 years in office. And we were successful at doing that. I worked with 3 separate committees to identify the different legislation that basically had embedded the endangerment finding from 2009 into statutory law, so that we could rip all of that out. And the package that we have put forward from the House in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act actually includes all of my priorities of making sure that we can get rid of that endangerment finding, so that then Lee Zeldin with the EPA can go in and nullify or repeal the endangerment finding. Everything global warming or climate change really stems from the endangerment finding from 2009. That's where the EPA declared methane, CO2, and 4 other gases to be greenhouse gases and pollutants. And that's what's given them the authority to do things like the CAFE standards or the electric vehicle mandates. That is the basis and the foundation for what California has done in terms of all of their bad policies. That is the basis for entering into the Paris Climate Accord. If we can get rid of the endangerment finding, if we can get rid of these things that are embedded in law, it actually is going to be a huge boon for our cattle industry. It will protect our cattle industry from these kinds of nonsensical regulations, but it's also going to unleash our energy industry, which is another thing that I worked very, very hard at with our the One Big Beautiful Bill, is making sure that we can continue to mine coal and other energy resources. So we are lifting the moratorium on coal production. We're lifting the moratorium on oil and gas leases. We're requiring mandatory leases being issued by the BLM and the U.S. Forest Service. We are mandating that the Forest Service and the BLM issue leases for timber production, and also mandating that they issue a minimum of certain 20-year leases, so that our timber companies can actually produce and have the certainty that they need for moving forward, so we can hopefully better manage our national forest resources. I am concerned that by accepting the money, the Angus Association is affirming the lie that has been agreed upon, that beef and the carbon they emit are bad for the environment. It's absolutely untrue. It is one of the most efficient forms of protein that we have. They just simply take grass that is also emitting carbon, and they transform that into something that we all love to eat. So we need to make sure that we continue to push back against this. And I don't know what relationship you have with the Angus Association or some of the other groups, but we cannot concede the lie that you guys are, that our cattle producers are hurting the environment. It's absolutely something that I will fight with everything that I have. I continue to move forward with mandatory country of origin labeling, and I think that we're getting some interesting support in a variety of places where people are realizing that we should be labeling where our food is coming from. I think that the MAHA movement has really helped with that, really exposed the fact that we should be focusing on what we're putting in our body and where it comes from. I have had the opportunity a couple of different times to visit with Robert Kennedy Jr. We'll continue to push this with him because I think that he understands the importance of this and the importance of people knowing whether they're eating American grown and produced beef or it's coming from other countries. We have co-introduced the Country of Origin Labeling Enforcement Act of 2023, aiming to prohibit retailers from labeling foreign beef as made in the USA. But one of the things that I've done with this MCOOL bill that was not included in others is we have a very strong enforcement mechanism. Violators will face a $5,000 fine per pound if they misrepresent the labeling on the beef or the packaging on the beef. I just really believe that reinstating MCOOL will provide U.S. cattle producers with a competitive advantage, especially when we are focusing on the entire MAHA or Make America Healthy Again agenda that is moving forward. 86% of American voters support the American Beef Labeling Act, and also 90% are concerned that foreign imported beef can legally carry a product of the USA label if it's merely processed in the United States. 77% of people also believe it's important that the beef they purchase was born, raised, and harvested in the United States. I'll just quickly talk about the status of the reconciliation package. As I mentioned a little bit ago, it has passed the House. It is always kind of amazing to me in working in this body how we continue to pull miracles out that we can get this legislation through. Is it ideal? No. Are there things that I disagree with in there? Yes. That's just the reality of the situation and some of the deal making that we had to make. But overall, I really do think it's one of the more important pieces of legislation I will ever be involved with in my time in Congress, simply because of what it does in terms of advancing the America First agenda. I've already talked about unleashing our ability to produce our own energy. There are a whole variety of things, the tax cuts, making permanent the reduction, the death tax aspects that I know is important to you. It actually now states that the exemption from the death tax for farmers and ranchers, it raises it to $15 million for single filers and $30 million for those who are filing jointly. So we have made that permanent. I know that many people have always been concerned about the ability to convey their properties to the next generation, and hopefully that will help. As far as Medicaid, there have been an awful lot of rumors about what we've done with Medicaid. Most of them are lies. That probably doesn't surprise you, but we didn't cut $880 billion out of Medicaid, but we are going to require work, school, or volunteer requirements for able-bodied adults who do not have dependent children. The federal government right now spends 7 times more money on that segment of the population that is an able-bodied adult without dependent children. We spend 7 times more money on them for Medicaid than we do the traditional population of low-income children, pregnant women, individuals over 65 years old, and individuals with disabilities. The evidence has shown that if we can have a work requirement of 80 hours a month, so just part-time, we can actually start moving those folks off of Medicaid and strengthen the program that way. We also are removing 1.4 million illegal aliens from the Medicaid rolls. We are saving, yes, very important. The reconciliation package also cuts $1.6 trillion in mandatory spending. It delivers the largest tax cut in the history for all Americans, and it provides the resources needed to secure the border and deport criminal and illegal aliens. And as I said, it unleashes American energy, it modernizes our air traffic control systems, and it repeals a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act or the Green New Deal. It actually repeals a lot of the subsidies that have really been impacting our traditional and legacy electricity producers. It repeals a lot of those tax credits and grants and financing. So again, hopefully we are getting back to some common sense in terms of what we're doing in Washington, D.C. It's been an interesting year so far. I can't believe it's only 6 months. It actually feels like it's been about 6 years. With all of the different work that we've been doing. But, and then the final thing I'll say is last Thursday, the House voted on the rescission package of $9.4 billion in waste identified in coordination with DOGE. One of the things that's been surprising to me is how angry people are over DOGE. I have simply referred to it as one of the only opportunities that we've ever had to do zero-based budgeting at the federal level. In other words, go through each of these agencies and look line by line by line by line of how they're spending money. It's just really nothing more than an audit. And I think the reaction that you've seen from certain segments tells you a lot about how that money had been being spent, how it had been being wasted, and the amount of fraud. We did just get a conviction this week for someone who had fraudulent transactions of over $500 million. And the example that I always use, and I think that when we started going through the USAID budget, and in the interest of full disclosure, I voted to abolish USAID a year and a half ago because I knew what it was. I knew what it had been doing. But even I didn't know how bad it was. I knew it was bad. I had no idea it was this bad. But what they were doing is it was a gigantic, absolutely gigantic money laundering scheme. A lot of the money going to the NGOs and then the NGOs contributing back largely to the Democrat Party in Washington, D.C. and in these states. But I'll give you an example of some of the programs where I think that the fraud was so evident. One of the line items uncovered was that we had given a $500,000 grant to a group to advance atheism in Nepal. Now, some of you in this room may think that that was a good use of money, but I really thought that that was beyond the pale. Now, in reality, I don't think that there was any organization advancing atheism in Nepal, but I do think there were 5 or 6 guys sitting around a table that collected a $500,000 paycheck from the United States government to claim that they were going to advance atheism in Nepal, right? And we can go program after program. I don't think that they probably spent $26 million in Guatemala on sex change operations. They might have spent some of it, but I think a lot of people made a lot of money off of those kinds of programs. And that's why people were so angry about USAID specifically, because USAID was a gigantic money laundering operation that had grown and advanced over the years in ways that were not only bad because of the graft and the amount of money being spent, but the fact that they were pursuing an agenda worldwide that was not only not in our best interests, but wasn't in the best interests of the countries that we were sending the money to. The agenda that was being pushed by the far leftists in USAID was not making people like us. In fact, I recently met with several lawmakers from Austria and Poland and former Soviet parts of the Soviet bloc. And they said the worst thing that America did to us was trying to destroy our culture. And that's why these programs were so bad. When you would bring these programs into our universities and our schools and our leadership, it wasn't just that the money was coming in, it was that you were destroying and undermining the very culture of who Poland is, who Czech is, who former Czechoslovakia was, Slovakia. Again, they said, we don't want the money because the strings attached to it were too extreme for us. So I think that the president, I think that DOGE is continuing to do some good work that we need to have done. I have asked the White House that they be sending us rescission packages essentially on a weekly basis. I don't care how much the money is. I don't care if it's 50 million or 100 million or 7 billion or 23 billion. I want rescission packages every month so we can start pulling money back to the Treasury from these horrible different programs, stop wasting this money and focus the federal government on the things that it should be doing rather than on the things that it should not. So with that, I again very much appreciate the opportunity to come and visit with you again today. It's always an honor to come here and see so many friends. It's kind of tough that I only get to see some of you once a year, but it's wonderful to catch up. You guys have been such great supporters. You've been so wonderful to work with over the years, and I so appreciate everything you do in protecting our independent cattle producers and protecting our way of life. So thank you very much.